Good evening.
Good evening.
This is the July 27, 2014 Meetup of the Austin Constitution Society. I'm John Roland, and I have several items this evening which I may make separate videos, but I thought I'd start out with one that is prompted by the recent court decision in the Hobby Lobby case. This has caused a lot of controversy, and it's interesting from a variety of points of view. It involved two acts of Congress. The one, of course, was the Affordable Care Act, which required employers to pay for insurance for their employees if they have enough employees, and which provided for the issuance of regulations as to what kinds of maladies were to be covered by that insurance. Hobby Lobby was under that mandate. However, there's another act called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, RFRA, which prescribes that essentially protections for the free exercise of religion under the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment. So, what Hobby Lobby argued is that they objected to paying for insurance that would pay for certain kinds of birth control procedures or drugs, which they felt were abortifacients, and the owners of Hobby Lobby, a closely held corporation, were morally opposed and religiously opposed to those kinds of measures. So they argued that they should not have to pay for insurance that would provide such coverage, and the Supreme Court decided in their favor, which of course has caused the about half of the political class to get all excited. But it raises a number of interesting issues from a constitutional point of view. Now, the viewer should be reminded that there are actually two religion clauses in the First Amendment. The first is the Establishment Clause, and the second is the Free Exercise Clause. The Establishment Clause provides that there should not be an establishment of religion. And what that means is that the government can't favor a particular religious sect with subsidies. They can't do anything that would cause that sect or religion to get more money than others get through voluntary donations. When this country was founded, most of the states had established churches, which they essentially used as arms of the government for the delivery of various charitable benefits, such as education, care of the elderly and ill, and so, the insane, and so forth. So they were welfare organizations as well as being religious organizations. And it was because the religious activities of those churches were benefited along with the charitable activities. It was felt by many, especially the churches that were not established, that it was unfair to establish some churches and not others. So that led to the Establishment Clause and to court decisions since then that the government must not seem to favor one religion over others. It must not lay its weight of either not only financial support but moral support to one in preference to another. Now there was another recent decision involving prayers before a city council meeting in which the court held that they were okay. So it has been doing some fine line drawing. But the Hobby Lobby decision is interesting because the religious objections of a religious group were the basis for exempting them from a requirement of a statute. Much like religious conscientious objectors have been exempted from the draft. They may be required to serve, but they can't be required to serve in combat, and so forth. And we saw the pattern of requiring conscientious objectors to go to war and serve as ambulance attendants and that sort of thing, but not to carry a gun. Now, of course, the question arises then, are there any limits to what kinds of exemptions that any religious group could claim on the grounds that it violates the tenets of their faith? The First Amendment does not define religion. At the time that it was written, the founders only knew about certain religions, of the kind that had significant number of followers in the colonies, and that, of course, particularly enough followers that they could become an established church. So they didn't know really, they knew intellectually, some of them at least, about such religions as Buddhism, Confucianism, Jainism, Taoism, and so forth, Shinto, that had religions that didn't have deities. Now, but if you had asked most of the people in the founding generation what they thought a religion was, they would probably have said that a religion that didn't include devotion to a deity was not a religion. And of course but on the other hand, there were some people at that time who did recognize things like Buddhism as a religion. It was not unknown to them, they just didn't know anybody who was of that following. So, then the question arises, okay, what's to prevent any individual or group of people from organizing what they call a religion with its own catechism, its own scriptures, its own tenets, its moral code, and so forth, and saying that this provision of this statute is contrary to our faith. In principle, anybody could do that to essentially nullify every provision of every statute, at least as it applied to them. So the question was not addressed in the Hobby Lobby case, but it does raise the question, has been raised on a number of legal forums in which I participate, like the Bulla Conspiracy or the Con Law Prof's email list. Basically, what is a religion for purposes of either the Establishment Clause or the Free Exercise Clause? Now, generally, free exercise comes in two major sides. Free exercise can mean members of a religion doing something, or it can mean them refraining from doing something, or resisting an attempt by government to make them do something. But historically, courts have not been favorable to religious claims of exemption for doing things that were otherwise contrary to law if done by anybody else. For example, recently in Philadelphia, an imam of a mosque attempted to cut off the hand of one of his congregants presumably because he had violated Sharia, the traditional punishment for of cutting off hands was for theft. We don't know what the circumstances of that were, but anyway, he didn't get to cut off the guy's hand. He was arrested and charged with attempted assault, or maybe just assault. So just because it's part of your religion doesn't mean you get to do it in American law. The Thuki, the cult of Kali, is a religion from South Asia, India, which believes in murder, ritual murder. And obviously we can't be having religions conducting human sacrifices in this country. So on the other hand, to what extent can a religion claim that it is prohibited from doing something and demand that the government not demand that they do it? Because this has come up, for example, with the wearing of various articles on one's uniform for members of the military. Can a member of the military wear a Jewish yarmulke, a little skull cap, under his hat when he's outdoors? You're not supposed to wear the cap indoors. Or wear an earring or any other insignia of, little tassel thing that Jews like to carry around. Or any number of things that various religions, they're tokens of their faith. We've had a number of decisions involving prisoners in prisons demanding to be allowed to practice their unusual faiths, including some Wiccans. Wiccans are often confused with witches, but they're basically believers in nature, in a Mother Earth God. So there have been a number of accommodations made to various kinds of religions, and also some non-accommodations. So here we have in the Hobby Lobby decision another example of such an accommodation. But we run, as I say, indicated into the slippery slope problem. Now, I raised the issue on one of these forums, two of them in fact. Okay, the Constitution Society, my organization, is also known as the Constitutionalist Church. We claim to be a religion, at least for tax purposes. And, we have a scripture, the Constitution. We are devoted to a cause, namely strict compliance with the Constitution. Now, some would say, well, that's a civic religion or a civil religion. That's not a sacred religion. Well, who's to say? A lot of people might feel that the Constitution was a miracle. They could be a believer in God and said that the Constitution is a latter-day scripture. It should be part of the Bible. Or if you started out as a Christian, or part of the Talmud or Torah if you're a Jew or whatever. So. But however, that raises the question that if constitutionalism is a religion, then it is certainly established in American law. And do we then need to carve out an exception in the Establishment Clause for constitutionalism? Because the Constitution itself, in the entire country, is an establishment of constitutionalism. And in fact, if constitutionalism is a religion, then the entire country is an establishment of religion. So these offer some nice problems for constitutional scholars, some of whom try to dismiss it as, silly or, not worth discussing. But the fact is that logically they are worth discussing. Now, I like to point out a particular example, which is the title of this talk. Is the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster exempt from any statutes? Well, on this website that you see projected on the screen here, it has a website, Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, venganza.org. Devotees of the Flying Spaghetti Monster call themselves pastafarians.
That's a good one. Oh, man.
And in public events, they often dress up wearing spaghetti draped over their bodies. They have certificates of ordination. They raise money for charity. They make loans to worthy causes. They have ministers. They have celebrants. They celebrate marriages.
Is that really true?
It's really true. There really is a Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster.
Oh, man.
Now, I have searched their site, and I don't find any conflict between the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster and any obvious statutes, except perhaps the choice of pastors to read prayers at public events. I mean, Catholics get to read prayers, Presbyterians, Methodists, Jews, maybe occasional Buddhist or whatever. But, if a pastafarian tries to be included in the lineup of pastors to give a dedication at a public event like a town council meeting, what are you going to do with that request? And of course, there's always a matter of tax exemption. Is a donation to the church tax deductible? Well, apparently they are claiming 501c3 status. So, and they do engage in charitable work. So, it is a very interesting problem that they present. And their main charitable program is to make small loans to people in poor areas that need help starting small businesses. So essentially, they're kind of one of the main activities is microlending. Now, so they're not just a college stunt, although apparently they started out that way. But again, and here we have a pastafarian minister sworn into office. He was, this is the guy here, wearing a hard hat.
Geez, John, how did you find these guys?
Well, I just know, look, when you run an organization like the Constitution Society, virtually everything of a constitutional nature comes to me sooner or later. I don't have to go out looking for it, it comes.
Oh.
So, yeah, here they have t-shirts, and he's, this guy, Christopher Schaefer was just seated as Pomfret Town Council member in Dunkirk, New York, in New York. So he's not wearing spaghetti for this occasion, but just goes to show. Now, I'm not going to propose to answer the questions in this video session. I just want to raise the issue because if religion can be defined to be anything anybody wants it to be, and your religion, however you define it, puts you in conflict with statutes, then how is the conflict to be resolved when nobody can really challenge whether your beliefs are your beliefs or whether or not they're sincere? Now, I remember when I was a kid in high school, one of my, not exactly a classmate, he was 2 years ahead of me in school, but I knew him. He claimed a conscientious objector status with the draft. So one day I got a knock on the door, and it was an FBI agent. And says, I'm here to do a background check on your classmate to find out if he's sincere in his religious beliefs. And it says, well, so we sat down in the living room. I said, well, I know him. I'm not a fellow church member. We never really discussed religion, but I know him to be an honest guy, and if he says his religious faith forbids him from serving in the military, I'm inclined to believe him. That's all I can say. So the FBI agent left, and I presume eventually filed his report. I don't know what the outcome of it was. But in other words, they were doing a background check on a claim of being a conscientious objector. And apparently they were trying to apply a standard of sincerity. Is this guy a sincere believer in this religion, or is he just trying to get out of a civic duty? So there are two levels of credibility. First, does the religion really preach something that is in conflict with the statute? And second of all, is an individual a sincere devotee of that religion? So there are tests that have to be applied at least two different levels. And of course, then you can bring up the question whether the religion itself is sincere, or if it's just a stunt, or if it's just trying to get its members out of a civic duty and inventing some religious tenet that the other members don't sincerely believe, but that they find it convenient to proclaim. So there are no easy answers to this question. I leave it to you, the viewer, to think about it. And if you were on a jury that had to decide whether some individual was in violation of some statute, and he claimed a religious exemption, how would you decide that? And assuming, of course, that the judge even let the case go to the jury. Usually the judge would try to intercept a claim of religious exemption before it got that far. But assuming he left it to the jury, how is the jury, or you in particular, going to decide it? You can imagine all kinds of possibilities. Think of almost any statute that you can. Now, some of them are fairly easy. Murder, theft, mayhem, trespass, and so forth. These are all positive offenses. In other words, you have to take a positive step to cause injury to somebody. And I think we can probably generally agree that a person is not religiously exempt from statutes criminally prosecuting those kinds of offenses. The problem comes in when a statute mandates something. It mandates that, for example, you clean your yard, or paint your house a certain color, or not fly a flag, or show up for jury duty, or for the draft, or for any number of other things. All those questions could come in principle before a jury. So before you get a case selected for a jury in a case like that, I invite you to think hard in advance how you would make a decision on a case of that kind. Here's where the church members are flying a kite, flying spaghetti monster, street demonstration. The Florida Capitol building has endorsed our religion by allowing a flying spaghetti monster holiday display on its grounds. I'm not sure what holiday they celebrate, but presumably it's a good one. And now, of course, they needed the flying pizza monster. And there's even some teaching in that church that the flying spaghetti monster will arise. I think that's, it's not clear whether that's rise as in fly or rise as in dough, but whatever. But there's a lot of stuff here. It's kind of interesting and cute, and who knows what the courts may bring us by and by on issues of this kind. So that'll conclude this segment of this evening's presentation. Look for the next one, and please visit our website, constitution.org, and encourage all your friends to do so. Visitation is down more than 50% since last winter. We're not entirely sure why, but other sites on with constitutional materials are reporting similar downturns in numbers of visitors, and there's still plenty to learn, plenty to do. This is no time to relax our efforts to return this country to strict constitutional compliance. So, if you're not doing anything more important, and you're probably not, then get on the net and start spreading the word, picking interesting pages off our website, sending links to them to everybody you know. Get on discussion forums, post links to our site on those discussion forums. Stir things up. It's not a dull subject. Remember, the Constitution was written in blood. There's plenty of exciting things to say about it. So do your part, join in, and let's see if we can't move the ball further toward the goal of constitutional compliance. Thank you.